the brave new world of epigenetics.
We are, in effect, a programmable computer.
How to change your destiny by changing your DNA.
This is a whole fascinating new technology.
And breaking the generational curse along the way.
If you know you have it, you'll avoid the consequences.
Plus, SonicFlood's Jeff Deyo shares how to cultivate a closer friendship with God by awakening pure worship. All that and more on today's 700 Club Interactive. Well, welcome to the show. The Tonight Show's Jimmy Fallon made a surprise announcement recently to a family affected by Hurricane Florence, one of many families helped by Operation Blessing.
Well, Terry and Divya MacArthur and their 12-year-old son were flooded out of their home during the hurricane.
For lack of a better word, it's a disaster. You know, some might refer to it as a nightmare. Romans 8:28 says all things work together for the good of those that love the Lord. So that's where I'm finding peace.
Operation Blessing gutted parts of the home and tore out wet flooring. During the demolition, the family was told the Tonight Show wanted to give a few hurricane victims a break from the disaster. You can imagine the MacArthur's surprise when Jimmy Fallon called them out during the show's taping in New York City. Take a look.
Your house, a very special house. Why is it special to you?
Because my grandmother left it to me.
Your grandmother left it to you, and you had a tough couple of years, huh? You guys were hit, was it Hurricane Matthew, 2016, Hurricane Florence?
Yes.
And you have no flood insurance?
No.
Well, our friends at the Home Depot Foundation and their partner, Operation Blessing, heard about your story, and they want to help. Here's what they're going to do. They're going to come in, they're going to fix your home, they're going to fix your roof, they're going to repaint and insulate your house, they're going to provide a new furnace, appliances, redo your yard, and send in a Home Depot designer to refurnish your home. Congratulations. I can't imagine what you've been through. Our thanks to the Home Depot Foundation and Operation Blessing.
And our thanks to you. If you're part of the 700 Club, if you're a member of the 700 Club, thank you. You're part of that home renovation for that wonderful family. So many families were affected, and it's a great joy to say, okay, we're going to stand with you. You don't have flood insurance, but you've got God's insurance, and we're here to help. So what a wonderful thing to do.
That Romans 8:28 applied well.
Yes, it did.
Well, thousands of people from around the world recently went to Melbourne for Awakening Australia. It's all part of a mission to bring 100,000 Australians to Jesus in a country where most people describe themselves as non-religious.
The event centered around the gospel, leading people to Christ and encouraging them to share the love of Jesus with other Australians. Many responded with thousands giving their lives to Christ. A video on Facebook shows attendees singing Amazing Grace and shouting the name of Jesus. Here's the clip. There you go, Australia.
Yeah, we had a lot of fervor there.
Well, the world's only seaworthy life-size replica of Noah's Ark. It's been impressing passengers traveling along Holland's Maas River for the past 2 years. The Dutch builder recently shared that he plans to sail the Ark to Israel. He says, I love the land, I love the country, I love the people. This is a copy of God's ship. It only makes sense to take it to God's land.
Well, the Ark was built in only 4 years to the exact specifications in Genesis 6. The 410-foot-long vessel towers to a height of 75 feet and a width of 95 feet. It holds more than 5,000 people and has 5 decks. Wow.
Yay. That's a big,
wow.
That's a big ship.
Yeah, that's a big ship.
And the best part is it's seaworthy.
Yes.
So it's done to the exact specifications, and I think it will do really well.
Yes.
Assuming they're going to the port of Haifa, it's going to make a whole new tourist destination out of the port of Haifa.
They'll see them coming.
Yeah. Here's something you may not know. Recently, geneticists have determined that you and I come from a single pair. And not only that, most animals on the planet come from a single pair. Forget is Noah's Ark a myth? Genetics is now saying, well, there's a whole lot of truth to that, and that is truly amazing news.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, in other news, Elon Musk's Hyperloop transportation system will be unveiled in Los Angeles by mid-December. The initial test tunnel is being used for the research and development of the Boring Company's tunneling and public transportation systems.
Elon has been pushing the underground system as a futuristic concept that would radically change transportation within and between major cities. Here's an example. Well, Elon is hoping to build these in Los Angeles, Chicago, and on the East Coast from downtown D.C. to Maryland. And you can zip along at 125 miles an hour. I assume it will also have Wi-Fi, so as you're letting others drive your car, you can do other things on the internet. But that's an amazing concept.
Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. You can be on that first trial. Would you do it?
No, not the first one.
Yeah, me neither. Not that we don't think it's a good idea. Just saying.
Not the first one. I'm not a test dummy. No. Well, with the coldest months of winter just around the corner, a school in the United Kingdom has banned luxury coats.
That's right. The head teacher at Woodchurch High School in England has forced students from wearing expensive jackets. Take a look.
Now, it's not a new idea. The whole idea of a school uniform is designed to equalize all students. And I went to a high school that not only did that, but it also equalized all allowances. And the parents had to sign a pledge that they wouldn't give their child any additional money so that everyone would go through the week with the same amount of money. It was all designed to equalize things, and you can debate as to does it work and does it really prepare you for the real world? Because as soon as you walk out in the real world, you understand there's a whole lot of inequality going on. But at least in a learning environment, which, you know, let's make learning all about learning. And so the excellence and the hierarchy, if you will, in a learning environment is how well are you doing in school? And that's the whole point of education, and that would be a good thing.
I don't really have a problem with it. I mean, in high school, to need a $1,000 jacket is kind of over the moon to me.
Well, in the real world, needing a $1,000 jacket is one of those, okay.
Yep. But I get that. I understand the whole thing of, you know, sacrificing the attitude or the whatever of people who have from people who don't have. But I do think kids in high school can be pretty mean, you know, pretty, I don't know, I just think it can be a struggle.
Not just high school, junior high school, elementary school, it just, you know.
I'd like to think by university they've maybe
a lot of
learned
lessons
a
you
few
learn in
things,
kindergarten as to
yes.
how to get along.
Exactly. Well, coming up, his band became known as the fathers of the modern worship movement. SonicFlood's Jeff Deyo shares how you can awaken pure worship in your life. He joins us, and that's next, so stay with us. Jeff Deyo was born into a musical family and remembers singing old songs from a hymn book over and over. But it wasn't until he was a professional musician that he developed heart for pure worship. Take a look.
Jeff Deyo was the lead singer of a Christian band called Zilch. At the end of each night, they played worship songs to close out their set. When people started responding, Jeff realized God was up to something. In 1999, Zilch found themselves in the middle of a massive move of pure worship and changed their name to SonicFlood. In his book, Awakening Pure Worship, Jeff shows how we can experience the presence of God in every area of our lives and why worship is so much more than just singing songs.
Well, Jeff Deyo is here with us now. It's great to have you with us on Interactive today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You have a new book out, Awakening Pure Worship.
Yep.
How do you define pure worship?
Well, that's a good question. Pure worship is really just our response to God's revelation of who He is. Yeah. So, and of course, this has to do with relationship, really is what it's all about. So if we're talking about pure worship, we're talking about a heart that truly seeks that intimacy and fellowship and friendship with God.
What do you see happening in audiences where you're performing today with regard to worship, Jeff?
You know, I think sometimes people actually come into a setting where worship is happening and they can encounter artists, they might encounter personalities on a stage, they encounter their favorite songs, they encounter the lights and the sound, and maybe even encounter other people encountering God and walk out believing that they've encountered Him, and really they've just encountered the things in that atmosphere, in the room. And so one of the things that I really challenge people in the book, say, guys, make sure that you're encountering the person of God, not just the song. The song is a tool to help us connect with God, right?
Because then when you leave, the person goes with you.
That's right. Yes, it's not like an event that you have to attend and then you leave and you leave God there.
So when you were with SonicFlood and you were performing in secular venues, I'm assuming, what made you start closing the set with worship songs?
Well, it was an interesting thing. It was kind of a trend with some of the Christian artists back in the day where people would have this little set. I said we kind of had our little nod to God in that moment. But we just thought it was a trendy thing to do at the time. But when we started doing this worship song, all of a sudden people started coming down and lifting their hands and crying out to God. And honestly, at first, I didn't grow up that way. So I was a little bit, it's kind of strange to me. But then it became so freeing because in that moment, I didn't have to be a rock star or anything like that. I could just be Jeff and I could love God while everyone else was loving God. And so it quickly became something that we wanted to do more of. So we couldn't help but just say, what if we did more than one song? What if we did a whole album like this and a whole tour? You know?
When you're writing, because you write both lyrics and music, how do you start that process when you're looking for something to contribute to pure worship?
Yeah, well, I think what I do is, number one, I will spend some time just at the keyboard and just singing my heart to God. And sometimes something will bubble up and I'll go, oh, that's something that I would want to say. And I want it to be something that I would want to sing to God that would touch my heart. And I'm thinking maybe if it touches my heart, it would also touch someone else's heart. So I imagine, what is it that someone maybe in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the struggle, would want to say to God, would want in their crying out moments or in their joy-filled moments, and then we write from that perspective.
When young people come, I mean, now many people come for the worship, obviously. What do you think they're most looking for? It just seems to me like the younger generation today isn't really moved so much by position or money or thing. They want something that's really genuine and real. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, I was going to use the word authentic. So I think they're looking for authenticity, and it's a battle because just because the young generation is looking for that, they don't always accomplish it. Just like any generation, we all wrestle with those things. I think they are truly hungering for something real. They've seen a lot of people, if we can be real, that maybe are in ministry, that are in public places, that maybe behind the scenes aren't living the same life that they're living in public, and they don't want that. Nobody wants that.
Exactly.
And so they're seeking, what is the answer? And that's really what I talk about in the book. We talk about how ministry cannot supersede intimacy with God. Intimacy has to come first, and then ministry will flow out of that intimate place with God.
So that being the case, when you're doing a concert, how do you prepare? Because you must feel sort of a responsibility from God himself to bring that atmosphere into the place.
Well, it's interesting because I think sometimes we do feel that responsibility, and a lot of times we respond incorrectly by trying to put the focus on what happens on the stage.
Yes.
If I put all of my energy into this interview and only that, and I had nothing, not a well to draw from, so I prepare off the stage so that I can flow freely on the stage. And so that's what I teach my students at North Central University, where I teach, saying, guys, as worship leaders, you have to start first becoming a worshiper, and then you will overflow and you will become the worship leader that you need to be in public.
God always responds when we come hungry, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yeah. Oh man, he surely does.
When you see that happen, it must be so, I know you're in your own moment with the Lord at the time, but it must be so exciting to see the God, the creator of the universe, coming down and both receiving the worship, but then giving the gift of intimacy to people.
It really is. And honestly, the way I look at it, Terry, is my time alone with God really is where I grow in him. And then when I'm on the stage, my job is to serve people and to help them encounter the presence of God. Of course, I am worshiping God on the stage as well, but I cultivated that relationship already in this secret place. So now it's flowing out, it's bubbling over. It's not me striving, trying to connect with God.
Oh, please, God, show up.
Yes. So I'm now in this place of service, and I have I joke about this, but I'll pretend like I have a towel on my arm and I'm like a server, and I come and I say, hey, would you like more rivers of living water with that?
Yes.
Oh, sir, would you like more bread of heaven with that? Those types of things as I'm leading worship.
You know, one of the things that happens to all of us in the world today, no matter what age we are, I think, is that we're like the gerbil on the little wheel, and it just goes faster and faster and faster the more you run. But to do what you're talking about, to prepare yourself to come into the presence of God, means carving out. How do you do that?
Well, it's so important. And, you know, I figure you have to, I want to carve out time with God on this side of being sane, right? Yeah. You could go crazy running that little wheel, right? I mean, just there's always so many things. I teach our students, I'm like, guys, we've got to learn how to say no. There's going to be plenty of opportunities. And we're so afraid if we don't say yes to everything, then we're going to miss out on something. And that's just based in fear. So we have to, and the enemy is trying to work every side, right? If he can't get us to sin, he's going to try to get us to be busy. He's going to get us to forget and forsake our relationship.
With good things.
Yes, with good things. Exactly right. Right? But just because they're good things, they're not necessarily God things. So we have to be disciplined. And that would probably be my #1 challenge for people with this book, is to carve out more time with God alone. It would change every other area of your life.
I think so too. That's what I was going to ask you, is Awakening Pure Worship is the name of the book, and cultivating a closer friendship with God. Well, friendships take investing in. And so you have many takeaways in here. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The #1 thing is take the time, carve it out, do it. Do you find that once you do that, or others close to you do that, that creates such a hunger in you because it's so legit?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, I think it's like acquiring a taste for something. Like the first time anyone tastes black coffee, they usually like, oh, this is horrible. But over time, if you consume something that maybe you didn't even like at the beginning, you acquire a taste for it. So I would say to our viewers today, if you don't have a taste for the Word of God, or if you don't have a taste for spending time alone with God, begin consuming it just like you would a black cup of coffee, and you will grow to have a hunger. The more that you consume God, the more that you will want God.
Yeah. I love it. Awakening Pure Worship. For more of Jeff's insights on worship, you need to get this book. And we live in an hour where more than ever we need quality, legitimate, authentic time with the one who created all of us. You can get a copy of it wherever books are sold. Jeff, thank you for being here. It's great to have you. Gordon?
Well, still to come, hear how you can literally rewrite your DNA and change your family's destiny.
If you make a healthy change, it'll be transmitted through your generations. If you make an unhealthy change, it will also influence subsequent generations. I mean, this is a whole fascinating new technology.
We go inside the science of epigenetics and share how it can shape the future of you and your family right after this. Well, epigenetics, it's a fascinating field that scientists have been studying over the last few years. And one of the key discoveries is we can turn certain genes on and off. And these changes can be passed down through generations. Here's Lori Johnson with more.
Like millions of Americans, Ashley Skidmore joined the trend of taking at-home DNA tests.
All of my friends were doing just the ancestry test, and I just decided on a whim to throw in the health section.
The results indicated Ashley inherited a gene that often leads to lung disease.
I took the results to my doctor, and my doctor was very alarmed by the results, and I had no idea what it even was.
The good news, thanks to the new science of epigenetics, there's hope for Ashley and others. DNA is not our destiny, because even if we inherited some genes we'd rather not have, epigenetics tells us we can turn them off. In his book, Change Your Genes, Change Your Life, Dr. Kenneth Pelletier says we control our genes, not the other way around.
How we live our lives and how we influence the expression of our genes. That's what's critical. So it gives us the responsibility and gives us the power to influence our life direction.
He says bad genes are activated by bad behavior. In Ashley's case, smoking turns on her problem gene.
That's what makes the gene express itself. But if you know you have it, then you can not smoke and you'll avoid the consequences.
It gives me hope that I can silence it. But if I were a smoker, it's basically my life expectancy is 50 years old.
Epi means on top of. Our epigenome is like flexible software on top of our genome, which is like fixed hardware. Our behavior controls the epigenome, which in turn controls the genes.
We are, in effect, a programmable computer. That's how we were made.
Equally fascinating, researcher Dr. Randy Jirtle proved epigenetic changes don't just stop with us. For better or worse, these gene manipulators can actually be passed down to future generations, backing up the biblical warning written thousands of years ago.
You can see that, in effect, what God, I think, was telling us is that since they're not totally erased necessarily from generation to generation as they go through the egg and the sperm, can literally give rise to problems in the next generation, in the following out the 4 and 5 generations.
When Dr. Jirtle fed healthy nutrients to pregnant mice, which carried a gene for obesity and jaundice, her offspring were born thin and brown.
There are these transgenerational changes that take place.
Dr. Pelletier believes similar scenarios play out in human beings.
So the good news, if you make a healthy change, it'll be transmitted through your generations. If you make an unhealthy change, it will also influence subsequent generations. I mean, this is a whole fascinating new technology.
So while we can't control the genetic hand we're dealt, the new science of epigenetics tells us we can control how these genes behave in ourselves and our offspring.
Well, it just underlines a lifetime of right living. And when you do that right, and you take that initial step, then it flows through the generations, which is what the Bible says. The sins of the fathers are visited to the third and fourth generation. But righteousness, right living goes all the way to the 1,000th generation. So you can impact a whole lot of people in how you conduct yourself. And this is brand new science, but it's backing up what the Bible says. And there's a very practical one for pregnant women. If you are starving yourself in pregnancy because you don't want to gain weight and you want to get your figure back, well, actually what you're doing is in your child, you're turning on a fat gene where that child now thinks they're going to be born into a starvation situation, so they need to store food, which is, you take that around, say it's okay to eat. Here's a word from Philippians. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others, especially the next generation. God bless.